Welcome back. The race is on for the mayor of Bradenton. Tonight we are joined by the candidates hoping to replace incumbent Mayor Wayne Poston. We are happy to welcome candidate Warren Merriman and Eleuterio Salazar. And we should note we invited Mayor Poston on several occasions to be on this debate, but he said he could not make it. And we regret that. But why don't we begin with opening statements, and we'll give you both 1 minute each to make them. And Warren, why don't we start with you?
Okay, thank you, Alan, for having me today. And I think it speaks volumes that the incumbent mayor isn't here this evening. I've served the city of Bradenton for the last 18 years, and I served it with distinction, and I treated people with dignity, equality, and respect during those 18 years. And when I was discharged from the Bradenton Police Department, the people of Bradenton remembered how I treated them. And they asked me to run for mayor. Now, the mayor can sit there and say that the police and fire support him, but I have the people's backing, and those are the endorsements that I want. You know, the police and fire are up for contract negotiations this current year, election year. So of course they support him. But I will bring equality back to our city because it's lacking in so many avenues. And that's why I'm running.
All right, Eleuterio.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this. You know, when I decided to run, I knew it wasn't going to be a surprise for many. I was born and raised in Bradenton, and I'm a product of Manatee County Schools, graduated from Lakewood Ranch High School. I've always been outspoken in my community and very involved. What I've done the last 15 years of my life has been strictly dedicated to bettering this community. So as I became more involved in the community, and became involved in various boards, serving on the budget committee for the school district, serving on a structure board for the county commissioner, doing various things, I noticed that there was lack of leadership. There was things missing. And after my leadership with the Latin Chamber of Commerce in 2014, I said, well, you know, politics is really where I'm going. So I decided to say, you know what, I'm going to take a run for mayor. And this year, last December, we took a run.
All right, thank you very much. We are just getting started. When we return, we'll have more from both of these candidates, so stick with us. Our debate continues between the two candidates trying to challenge Wayne Poston for his position as mayor of Bradenton. You'll both have 90 seconds to answer the questions from this point on, and there are a lot of areas I want to get to. But we want to begin with the most obvious to anybody who lives or works or even passes through Bradenton, and that is redevelopment. In an excellent analysis of the mayor's race by Dennis O'Malley of the Bradenton Times, he pointed out the criticism of downtown redevelopment as disjointed, incoherent, and lacking a clear plan for the future that a majority of the city's residents will benefit from. So, what are your plans to have a coordinated, integrated development plan for the city of Bradenton? And I'll start with you.
You know, it's important that we note that we have many issues that we need to address before we get started in our redevelopment, and they can go simultaneously. But what we need to note is that we have a heroin epidemic that is on the rise, and it's here, and we need to clean up our act before we start really seriously thinking about where we're going to start placing structures. Part of my plan is to ensure that we're attracting our local businesses, the redevelopment of our entertainment district, ensuring that we have a downtown entertainment district that actually attracts and it stays open past 4 o'clock. Currently, we have a downtown area that really isn't past open in 4 p.m. At 4 p.m., most of those places close down, and you don't see much action down there. That shouldn't be how a downtown area works. If you look at other major cities that surround us, their city nightlife, anytime after 4 p.m., they're still going. You can shop, you can live, you can do many things. So I want to work with City Council to ensure that we do have a place where we can live, work, and play for all age groups, not just millennials, although that is an important age group. We need to ensure that we attract all age groups to our downtown area and ensure that we have an entertainment district that is working and feasible. But again, we need to ensure that we are cleaning up our act when it comes to the heroin epidemic and those drug rate.
Right, Mr. Merriman.
Redevelopment. One street does not define a city. They focused a lot on Old Main Street, but we have to look outside the box. We have to go to East Bradenton, which is a part of the city, and it's often neglected. But if you drive down our main corridors of Manatee Avenue and even Cortez Road, there's a lot of empty commercial storefronts. So you have to look at that aspect and bring business to our community. They've been a year now without hiring an economic development director. That could have been already in the process. And when you have all the empty commercial buildings, that's blight. 9th Street West, 14th Street, Tamiami Trail, it's blight. I mean, it's dilapidated old structures that the city has not been proactive, and there's not a strategic plan. I've developed a quality of life strategic plan where I bring that aspect into the overall 4-year accountability plan, because our mayor hasn't been held accountable for economic development or the redevelopment. It's basically Old Main Street and the riverfront, and that does not make a city. When I'm out canvassing the city asking for votes, I look at the conditions of their neighborhoods. I look at the conditions of their streets. And you have to bring all that into one plan. And I have that plan. And I will be hiring an economic development director upon entering office.
All right. Our next question deals with the police department, and this is an incredibly broad topic, namely because you're the former deputy chief. But I also want to keep in mind there are a lot of areas we want to get to, so I don't want this to dominate the rest of our discussion. But when it comes to the police department, number one, in all my reading, it seems like both of you, your uphill battle is that the mayor is very close with the police department, and the firefighters, they do a lot in terms of canvassing, voters and residents. So you have to make your case to members of the police department and the fire department in terms of why they should support you. Deputy Chief, you know the police department better than anyone. What is your case, given what your history is there?
Well, thank you. The 18 years that I spent at the Bradenton Police Department, I worked in every department and every unit within that department. So I know it. I was the original accreditation manager. And then after accreditation, I was also the internal affairs director and the professional standards, first time. And I battled corruption. I investigated officers sleeping with prostitutes. We had a lot of issues, but I cleaned that up. And do you make enemies with the union when you're their internal affairs director? You do. That's inherent. But to say that the Bradenton Police Department and the Bradenton Fire Department support the mayor is, you have to look at the backside, and they are in contract negotiations. There's a culture in the Bradenton Police Department that still reaches out to me, but they're in fear because they saw what happened to a deputy chief that called out the prior chief on the accreditation issue. And the assistant chief that was the accreditation manager.
I just want to interject. Are you saying that the problems that you had in terms of the charges is directly related to the issues that you raised in terms of accreditation?
Absolutely. I was writing a $1.5 million grant the day before I went to the chief and told him that the Bradenton Police Department was not meeting the mandatory standards set forth by the Florida State Commission on accreditation. Subsequently, the next day, I was placed on administrative leave, Alan. And subsequent to that, the next week, they still filed that report in September, and they also filed a full compliance in January of 2015, stating that all standards were met. Right. I will have that investigated.
We'll continue on that area in a second, but Mr. Salazar, I also want to give you an opportunity to talk about how you are going to try to get the police and fire departments on your side in terms of helping you win this election.
Listen, at the end of the day, as mayor, you're the ultimate police commissioner. It's not your obligation to be their best friend, but to be their boss. And it's clear to see by Mayor Poston's ability to show up to only 2 debates out of all the debates we've had, his lack of leadership. So when we can say that a fire department, a fire union, and a police department would support a mayor with that type of leadership, we have to start questioning, is that the type of leader they really want, or is that just the type of leader they're being forced to support? My belief is that they're being forced to support, for whatever it may be. So it's not about wishing, to have their support because I need it because it's going to win this race, because my campaign is all about grassroots. We've had volunteers who've come all the way from St. Pete down to Sarasota who come to volunteer just for this campaign. So when we go out, we don't depend on anyone else but a grassroots organization.
All right, we have to take a quick break, but our debate will continue in just a moment. Welcome back. If you're just joining us tonight, we are hosting a debate between the two challengers running for the mayor of Bradenton. They are Warren Merriman and Eleuterio Salazar Jr. Thank you. Sorry about that. And we also want to point out again that we invited Mayor Poston and he was unable to attend. And that's a shame because, Mayor, if you're listening or watching, the water is warm. Mr. Merriman, I want to pick up on our discussion in terms of your departure from the Bradenton Police Force, because people hear that you pled guilty to a charge, and I want you to give you the opportunity to put that in perspective in terms of what that was about, and whether or not you've owned up to what, if any, mistakes that you made there.
No, I've maintained my innocence from the beginning. What it was there was an agency practice where members would relieve other members to attend other events or other details. And when you have a malcontent employee that decides to basically call his boss out on an agency practice, and you provide the chief an opportunity on someone that called him out, and the mayor, essentially on the accreditation issue, that was talked about a year in advance. But after the accreditation, then it was brought to light. And so it was something that he had in his back pocket, and he brought it forth, and I fought the charges. I never pled guilty. I went all the way to trial. I was offered pretrial intervention throughout, and I refused. I took 2 lie detector tests, and I passed with 0 deception of theft from the city.
Let me interject at one point, because Adam mentioned it in his story, and it's been written about, questioning about whether this is a revenge candidacy.
Absolutely not. I'm not doing this because of revenge. One part, and I can elaborate on that prior question, is I've asked the City Council to relinquish the title of Police Commissioner from the Mayor's office by a charter change. It's antiquated. This mayor, he has no experience as a law enforcement officer, and the chief should be held accountable so we don't have cover-ups like the accreditation and the property room evidence scandal.
Mr. Salazar, let me give you a similar question in terms of the issue about whether the mayor should also be the police commissioner. Is that an inherent conflict?
It's been that way, for God knows how long. Should it be the chief's position to be held responsible? I believe it should be. A chief should be fully responsible because the mayor has a lot of work already on his hands, and a majority of it he can't do already. So unfortunately, I would have to say that that title does need to be stripped.
All right, let's move on to another topic also involving the police department, and that is the relationship with the community. We have done stories just last week about the NAACP asking for information involving traffic pullovers and whether or not that there was inherent bias in the numbers of African Americans who have been pulled over in the city of Bradenton. Obviously, there is tension there. And on one hand, you do see the police department trying to work with the community. We just reported the other day about the Coffee and the Cop program, which seems like a good idea. But what would you do to lessen the strain between the community and the police department? And let me begin with you.
I think, it all begins with what we've said is transparency. That's the most important thing, is we lack transparency. When we had the NAACP request those records, why they were given skewed numbers, that should have never happened in the first place. The fact that that happened sets a bad tone, sets a bad connection between those two organizations. So now you have bad dialogue between those two organizations, and it sets the precedence that they might not be trusted anymore. So they're going to continue searching and demanding answers, and they have every right to do so because there wasn't clear transparency of those numbers. What we have to start doing is we have to start getting into our community. The Coffee with the Cop program, great. But what is that really doing? Is that really affecting our neglected areas of our community where we need them most? Is it really taking it out to MLK, to 14th Street, to 9th Street, where we need them most? You know, many people are scared or afraid to approach someone in uniform, getting them out of their cop cars, saying, hey, I see you walking. Would you like a bottle of water? Just showing that human decency goes a long way. We have to start being approachable as law enforcement officers, and understand that our community and law enforcement, it's a two-way street. We have to work together as one.
Okay, Mr. Merriman.
You know, Alan, I started that relationship with the NAACP 18 years ago, and I'm proud to be a member of the NAACP because when you're working with that community of Bradenton, and they're often neglected by this mayor. I've responded out to homicides such as the 13th Avenue Dream Center shooting. The mayor was not out there. He likes to wear the jacket and the badge to a coffee with cop, but it's surprising that that's right before an election. Why wasn't it done 4 years ago or 17 years ago? There's a lot of things that the mayor's doing now to promote the police department and his candidacy. I have never done that. I've actually went out to East Bradenton and I've worked with them, but it goes back to accreditation also. There was a standard, a mandatory standard for bias-based profiling that would have held the Bradenton Police Department accountable in regards to the traffic stops, the training of those officers, and when you let the accreditation go 2 years ago, you also let that mandatory standard go. And I think that's why we have the problem right now that we do, because they're not held accountable. And the mayor did not show up to your show to discuss the NAACP because he knows he failed.
Okay, one of the biggest problems facing Bradenton, Manatee County, the Suncoast, the state of Florida, and the entire country is the heroin epidemic. But Bradenton and Manatee County is the epicenter of this problem. Almost 900 overdose calls this year alone, and 60 of those calls were overdoses and they were fatal. What can a mayor do to change that? And Mr. Merriman, I'm going to start with you.
I go back to my law enforcement career. I worked on a street-level narcotics unit under, at the time, a corporal named James Rackey. We cleaned up Tamiami Trail. We cleaned up the drug areas. And my goal is to have Lieutenant Rackey head up a task force, and we're going to take those streets back from the drug dealers that have regained them in the last 2 years. When I was there, we weren't known as the #1 drug death capital that we are now. And we're the county seat for Manatee County. So the mayor can say that we're number 46 ranked, but you cannot neglect that horrible, tainted image of our city. And you have to get rid of that. And that's through enforcement. But it's also through education and in our high schools, our middle schools. You have to start there, but we have to be proactive in the enforcement. He's never spoken out one time about the heroin epidemic, and we have to take action.
Mr. Salazar.
You know, before I came on the show, we were out canvassing with some volunteers, and there was a gentleman who overdosed right outside, a block, I would say, outside of an elementary school. That shouldn't be happening. That was in city limits, in my ward, particularly. This issue has gone way too far without having a mayor who has swept it under the rug, who has pretended like it doesn't exist. In fact, the very first time he mentioned it was in our last debate at the Bradenton Herald debate. And I called him out on it because I said, it's a shame that you now, after so many debates, you decide to bring it up. So how we resolve these issues? One, we need to work with our local grassroots organizations. There are grassroots organizations out in the community, like No Longer Silent, the Harm Reduction Project, that are fighting this epidemic, but need someone who's going to advocate for them. You also have a not-for-profit organizations out there that are willing to fight this epidemic, but also need a leader in the city who is willing to partner with them and engage in conversation. When we stop putting that wall up, we can start really educating our people and really start engaging in conversations.
Right. Let's move on to a different topic, and that it involves affordable housing, which is a challenge not only in Bradenton and Manatee County, but obviously in Sarasota County, and particularly among millennials. And we did a broadcast just a week or two ago about how millennials are choosing to move elsewhere that might be less expensive. Mr. Salazar, you are a proud millennial yourself. What would you do about that?
Like I said, we have to start creating an environment that not only supports millennials, but supports all age groups. But millennials are a huge factor because at the end of the day, they're our future doctors, our future politicians, our future broadcasters. They're our future. And so we need to create an environment that's going to be able to provide attainable housing, a place for them to enjoy themselves when it comes to an entertainment district, and also ensure that they have jobs that are attainable to them. Because oftentimes they leave here in search of a better job, and they don't come back because there's nothing for them to do here. Not that there's not a job, there's plenty of jobs. We have jobs here, but we need to add more jobs. But there's also nothing that really, really is exciting here. We have a great river walk. There are some things, but we need to expand our entertainment district. We need to ensure that there's affordable and attainable housing for our millennials to be able to live in. So those are things that we need to provide a platform for them to be able to do.
Mr. Merriman.
You know, I have a 24-year-old daughter that did move back to Bradenton after graduating college, but she tells me every day, there's nothing for me here, Dad. There's no attainable housing. There is no nightlife to speak of in the entertainment district. But when you go to attainable housing, I'm a licensed realtor with Premier Sotheby's. So I'm out in the field every day working with new buyers, and they just cannot afford to live in the city of Bradenton currently. And if you go back to the rental issue, we have a lot of dilapidated houses, but we have to build incentives, and you have to have a plan to repair those houses. One of my goals is, and it's often neglected, the public works employees that we have, they get neglected. I want to offer those long-term employees to fix up those dilapidated houses in our community and keep them on with our city and show some appreciation. But the attainable housing, we've went 17 years now with no plan to build. Across from the new Manatee Players, that was a perfect opportunity to construct attainable housing within walking distance of our downtown district and the Riverwalk. They let it go. It's going to be a parking lot. That would have been a prime opportunity to make attainable housing a reality.
All right, gentlemen, we have to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to have closing statements from each one of you. Welcome back to our debate between the two candidates running to be the mayor of Bradenton. We now go to closing statements. Each of you will have a minute, and Mr. Salazar, we'll begin with you.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys having this and putting this together for us. You know, when I speak to the voters that are watching this tonight, I want you guys to realize that we have a mayor who has sat in office for 17 years, who has really only minimal projects to speak on. It's time that we take Bradenton in a new direction. And if you're ready for someone who's going to provide a fresh, new perspective, a vibrant perspective for the future, for the city, and really work on cleaning up our city and engaging our citizens in everyday government, then it's your time to elect a new leader. This is your opportunity to elect someone that is going to be your voice at City Hall, not someone who's going to sit behind a desk. So when you go to the polls starting on Monday, make sure you vote Salazar for mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Merriman.
You know, I love this city. To run for mayor with even being more scrutinized from the 18 months, I think that should speak to itself, to the citizens and the voters, that I'm willing to go through that scrutiny and show that I have a plan to better Bradenton, because I believe that we can be the best city in the United States. But it comes with a plan. I have a 4-year accountability plan that I will present upon being elected to the citizens, either online or in hard copy, where they're going to be able to check my accountability for my entire 4 years. We've went 17 years without accountability in our mayor's office. That's wrong. I'm a people person. I've knocked on over 3,500 doors personally and asked for the votes. And today, I will ask for their votes. I'll appreciate their votes, either if they vote by mail early or at the ballot on November 8th. I would appreciate it.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. And Mayor Poston, we wish you were also here. When we come back, we'll have a setup of the debate tonight, along with an interview with ABC political commentator Cokie Roberts.